There are lots of nonprofits and universities and even some companies that are trying to figure out how to bring democratic deliberation online, realizing that a lot of the behaviors that the internet has brought to us, it's that genie's not going back in the bottle. We're not going to go back to our town hall and, have deliberations exclusively in that forum. I guess I wonder if you see a path forward there, if you think that the internet and democratic deliberation are fundamentally compatible in some way.
I think they absolutely are, and I think that even the internet is currently constituted as fundamentally compatible with democratic deliberation. I spend a lot of time talking to my local political activists and my local representatives, also people around the world who are involved in causes like mine. I'm a member of Yanis Varoufakis's DM25 movement. I think that there's lots of democratic deliberation around, and when you look at things like that Audrey Tang, the CTO of Taiwan, has done with deliberation tools that try to surface areas of consensus rather than areas of difference, and discussion boards and so on. It's been really effective. Here in the US, one platform I would call your attention to is Vermont's Front Porch Forum. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's a really exciting place where you get to post, I think it's once a day. Each person gets to post once a day. And by default, you only see the post from your immediate neighborhood. And it's really effective at rallying people, at addressing local issues. It's very civil. People on all sides of the political spectrum participate in it. It's become very central to life in Vermont. So it's clear that the fact that the sunshine can't reach the forest floor is choking out a lot of these things like Front Porch Forum, but also that where light does penetrate the canopy, you do get all kinds of super interesting things popping up that, they may not be stable in a long-term configuration, right? It may be that what works for Front Porch Forum in 2025 won't work in the political environment of 2030 or 2050. That's fine, right? We don't have to use the same tools over and over again. But one of the things I know from being in political movements all my life is the fact that you did have a community with other people at some point in the past means that in the future, it's easier to return to those people. And actually, far-right movements have their own version of this. There's a great scholar called Catherine Ballou. I believe she's at the University of Chicago, who studies far-right movements. And one of her areas of research is this group of neo-Nazis who were radicalized in Vietnam in the military. And when they came back, they published zines that they made with nickel photocopiers at grocery stores, but it was very inefficient. And one of them got an Apple II Plus, and they realized that they could use BBSs to spread and network with other neo-fascists. And they formed an armored car robbery gang. And they robbed armored cars to buy Apple II Pluses for every pencil neck Hitler wannabe in the country, and gave them all computers and modems. And when you look at the contemporary fascist online presence, inevitably, the longest tenured members of those forums, who are the ones who are setting the norms and so on, they were all fascist kids on that message board in the 1980s. And they have spread out like people who saw the Velvet Underground all starting a band, right? Nazis who were on this message board in the 1980s all started some grotesque Nazi forum, and they're able to work together because they have these personal ties from this moment where they're all in a movement together.
It's interesting. I mean, one of the things we associate with democratic deliberation, though, is the notion of a public, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that internet affords are these kind of not exactly public places, right? Where people who are like-minded can find each other and can say things without having to be accountable as one has to be in public. And that's a feature, I think, that we haven't quite figured out how to manage, right? You can hide behind anonymity. You can amplify your stuff with a trillion bots that will act as if they're people, right? So the idea of having something like you're describing with the Vermont platform, mm-hmm. right? That's, you get one person to do something per day. And it seems like something like that really requires a notion of kind of authenticating what an authentic user is, like, and showing yourself to be part of a community and all of those things that we would say are really important. And so always a question for me in terms of the internet is, how do you scale those things? Or is scale really the enemy?
Do you need to scale those things? Right. I mean, look, anonymity has played a really important role in democratic deliberation as well. I mean, this is the home of the Federalist Papers here in America, right?
Right.
There's always been a place for anonymous speech in this, and anyone who's read about the Red Scares and so on knows that the simplistic formulation that if you're not willing to sign your name to your political views, they're not firmly held, really doesn't understand how movements change. And we were talking earlier about Snowden, and after the Snowden leaks came out, I'm a privacy advocate, and I ended up spending a lot of time talking about what Snowden's leaks meant. And I would tell people that, we live in a world today, although it's changing again, but we live in a world today where things that were illegal in living memory, like so-called interracial marriage or consuming cannabis or being gay, that those things are not just legal, but are widely accepted. And we view the fact that it used to be unlawful to be those things or do those things. We view that as like a stain on our national conscience. And unless you think that like all the social progress we're ever going to make has been made and there's nothing else to change about our mores, then you should assume that someone in your life, statistically, who matters to you and whose happiness, your happiness can never be complete without theirs, that someone in your life has never told you who they really are and has never opened up to you. And unless there's a space where they can privately deliberate with you, where you and they can have a conversation together, they may never do that, right? They might go to their grave with this, huge sorrow in their hearts because you never really knew who they were and they loved you and you loved them, right? And so that's a really strong case for democracy emerging not just out of public, but out of private forums, and the solidaristic energy that comes from being in a private space and discussing things. After all, the way that we got homosexuality legalized was not by putting a pink triangle on the sleeve of every person who was gay, right? It was about people who were gay choosing the time and manner in which they came out to other people to recruit them as allies. You tell your dad about it when you're on a fishing trip with them, not when you're at the Christmas table with your racist uncle who's going to freak out. And that is how these big alliances got built, and that's how they changed our world. So, I would put hiring 1 million bots to amplify your message in a completely different bucket from having private places or anonymous places. And, speaking of anonymous, the anonymous movement, which played a really important role in the Arab Spring and a really important role in revealing the activities of cyber mercenaries who are working for, wealthy, corrupt individuals in authoritarian states and so on, they not only operated anonymously, but they had an extremely democratic form of deliberation. They had no way of compelling one another to act, right? The only way that they could act is by convincing each other. It's a bit like if you've read Graeber and Wengrow's Dawn of Everything, where they talk about the fact that indigenous war chiefs in the forest tribes in the Northeast, that they didn't have the power to draft warriors. They had to talk them into going to war. And so the greatest rhetoricians of indigenous societies were these war chiefs. And there were volumes and volumes of debates between these guys and monks, Jesuits, that were bestsellers in France, where they just argue circles around them. And it was this that, the Enlightenment scholars picked up. And it was this is, the origins of the Enlightenment were these incredible debates, this deliberation between these people. So that's the modus operandi of anonymous, right? When you don't know who these people are, you don't know how to find them, that you only get to talk to them if they show up to listen. And you all get together and decide, okay, we're going to hack the Church of Scientology and dump all their documents. Then we're going to do the same thing to H.B. Gary. We're going to, we're going to help bring down the Tunisian government and go in solidarity with the people in the streets. That's all happening through anonymous deliberation. And it was hugely important to movements that were about human rights and democracy.